Can you imagine it's been 2 months since I started making this game? My god, it doesn't even feel like it's been that long since I posted the first video about it here. And seeing how it was before, since the beginning there, you can see how much it has changed since then. Wow, there are so many things I'm going to present here in this new video that I'll start right away so I don't waste much time. It turns out there's so much new stuff I add to the game every day. It's not possible to show everything here in the video, so there are many things that have been altered and I haven't shown here, but they've been changed for some time. Today I'll try to show a few more things, some new things since the last video, and a lot was done to improve the quality of life in the game too. I will also present here now the smart abilities, which is something I wanted to do before when I created the wizard class, right? And it was even the guinea pig class I used to make the intelligent crimes. So I will start by showing you some improvements that can be noticed right away, which had something to do with the quality of life, a bit of the game's presentation. It was somewhat confusing when everything happened, and one of the things I ended up doing was changing the game's font, okay? Before, I was using a totally generic font. I was using Arial, which is the standard Windows font, but I had removed its smoothing to make it look kind of pixelated, right? But that was very strange because it wasn't made for that, right? It's not a pixelated font, but to work in this type of game, in this type of aesthetic, I needed to make it pixelated because it is a very small size and it needed to match all the game's art. So for that, I kind of needed to learn how to create a new font and put the new font in Godot. It's something I had never done before, but Godot has very good support for this kind of thing, so it wasn't very difficult. I made the whole font in pixel art, all in bitmap, which is that type of font you make as if they were several sprites, each letter, each thing, all in sequence. And I added it here. I made it in various sizes so there wouldn't be distortion when increasing the size. And I think the result turned out very well. It gave a much better look. I'll put here some images of how it was before and how it turned out after. I made a few adjustments, a little bit in the font settings. I think it looked much better in the presentation. And taking advantage of this new font, I did something that helped a lot in the strategy of understanding what's going on. Because before, with the intention of speeding up the game, which is something I'm trying to do with this type of game, because whether we like it or not, this type of game, as great as it is, tactical RPG strategy is very slow, and that's a problem. Mainly nowadays, we don't have much patience to play very slow games like that, most people, and it's always good to speed up where possible. And one thing I had done was to make all the information appear like a list above the character, so whenever you gave an attack, caused some negative effect, all of this appears as a list above him. But it was getting very confusing, especially with area skills, where it dealt damage to multiple characters, applied effects to several characters, a lot of things appeared on screen at once, very quickly, the camera was moving, you couldn't understand what was happening. So, taking my main inspiration from Final Fantasy Tactics, I did it in a way where things appeared one after another and the camera started moving as soon as the whole animation was done. This added a bit of smoothness to the game, increased the delay a bit, but almost insignificant, made it much more strategic and easier to understand. Because until the time you lose here, seeing what's happening, you would lose trying to understand what happened. One thing I changed as well was the way the turn is done. The turn is now divided into 3 types of action you can take, being it the movement action, the main action which would be an attack, a skill, a buff, something you use, and the action to pass your turn, which is when you choose the direction your character will face and pass your turn to the next game. This was already working before, but before I would pass the turn, as soon as you performed the main action, which was kind of automatic. As soon as you performed it, the turn would pass, and this somewhat limited what you could do In the game, you could even move and use abilities right after, but if you used an ability, you would end your turn, not even choosing the direction where you stayed. Now all three actions are possible, so you can indeed use an ability or an attack and then move and still choose the direction where you will stay. You can choose the direction after using an ability. In the end too, so it becomes much freer to perform actions, it's much better to make strategies. You can do the famous hit and run with poison, staying at a safe distance, and it got much better this way. The strategy became much broader, but you still have the ability to move and attack all at once. If you try to attack someone who is not immediately within your reach, you will move to the location and attack, then you will have to perform both actions, and after that you just choose the direction and end your turn. There's not much to do there because you've already performed all the actions at once, but I'll explain a bit here what smart skills are. When I created the mage class, I had made two elemental skills, which was the fire skill, the ice skill, each with its own peculiarities. Now some that cause different negative effects, have different damage, have a chance to cause different effects, but they work more or less similarly. A damage skill that will cause a negative effect. Even the MP cost and casting time were the same, but of course a wizard couldn't have just that, so I created here two new levels for each of the skills. So now we have the fire skill at level 1, 2 and 3, and the ice skill also at level 1, 2 and 3, but when I went to create this, long before, when I was thinking of a model, to create smart writing, this was a problem, because all the characters will have only 3 skills, and you have these skills in 3 levels will make you fill the whole bar to have the 3 levels of abilities available. If you need to use, if you have little mana, want to use a weaker ability or want to use a stronger ability to eliminate enemies faster, and you would spend everything on that, which could be a problem when creating your build and feel somewhat limited. So I created the smart skills like this. I designed it in such a way that if you have access to the strongest ability, for example, Fire 3, Fire level 3, which I will call here Giga Fire. The Mega Fire is level 2, the Fire is level 1, and the Giga Fire is level 3. You will automatically see through the skills range, they're within the skills area, all the enemies that are in it, and he will identify. The first thing he will identify is if you have enough mana to use the skill at the highest level. If you don't, he will automatically switch to the lowest level since you can't use the strongest one. But even if you can use the strongest one, there is enough MP, all the enemies within the area can be eliminated with a stronger skill. For instance, you can eliminate everyone using the fire skill. It will transform into the level 1 fire ability, since it will already be enough to defeat the enemies, so it does all this analysis beforehand. It's even a way to speed things up. You don't need to keep testing which will deal more damage, will it kill, will it not? It automatically does this, and when you use the ability, it will use the weaker fire, because that way you will use less mana. And that's the only difference between them. Besides the animation, the stronger abilities cause more damage and use more mana. And that's what I did for these damage abilities, but other abilities that I will add as well, like healing abilities, will look if, for example, your ally will be fully healed with a weaker heal, so there is no need to use a stronger heal. Items, for example, if the ally doesn't have any negative effects, there's no need to use items to cure effects. You can use the item to heal HP if they have less HP. This will all be analyzed. I'll even show here all the skills of levels 1, 2 and 3, and you see that everything is automatic. I'm not selecting any of them, everything is selected automatically exactly as I need. And of course, for that, for the mechanics engine that I add here, I needed to do one more thing, but which is a great addition, which is you being able to see how much you will cause damage before dealing the damage. At that moment when you choose whether or not to use the ability, you can see there on the enemy's HP how much damage you will cause, and that's very good. You can really tell this ability here is causing little damage. He has resistance to certain types of damage, he has a lot of defense, or use a magic skill, use a skill that ignores defense, and so on. It can cause a negative effect. It's a better way to visualize and test this strategy. I'll show all the skills here. This fire skill, Fire 1 that has already been shown, Fire ability 2 which has a slightly different visual effect, a bigger fire fire coming from above, like a blast, and there's also Fire Ability 3, which is more of a field animation ability, where Ether starts on the ground, circulates, and creates a fire tornado, hitting all enemies, all have the same area, all have the same loading time, all have more or less the same thing, cause the same negative effect, but have this difference for each one with a higher mana cost depending of the level and greater damage. I'm going to show the ice skills now. The ice skill 1 had already been shown. It's a skill that throws comes from above, from the ether, an ice stone that falls on the enemy's head. The mega ice skill, which would be the skill Ice Tushtu, să is formed and însă his opponent Jinda, freezing and breaking the ice, thereby causing damage. And the icy skill 3, the ether comes from above as well, but it is almost materialized as a giant block of ice as soon as it hits the ground, striking all enemies within the area. And like I said before, these intelligent abilities are very important because they will greatly help with some abilities in the player's quality of life, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with this, okay? It's going to be really good. Some abilities will have various levels, but for that you will also need to have the weaker abilities before getting the stronger one. So you can't just save up points to buy, for example, Fire 3, which would be the Giga Fire. You would need to buy the Fire first, then the Mega Fire, and then the Giga Fire, because kind of having the Fire, Tier 3 means you can use all 3 skills. Makes a little sense, right? To access a more advanced skill, you would need to learn the other skills, both basic and intermediate. And also, so as not to lose the habit here, every time I show a new video, I show a new class here, right? Which is to show that I'm advancing in this part too, because there will be a lot of classes in the game. This is an important part of the game, so always I am trying to bring in new classes to advance this part. That way, it won't take too long for the game's progression, and we already have all these classes kind of organized. But today I will not be bringing one class here, okay? Instead, I'm going to bring 2 new classes to kind of celebrate these last 2 months, right? I'm going to bring 2 new classes, and these are classes whose design I really liked, okay? So I will show you the very first class, which is the Rogue. This is a thief or something like that, which will be a class that comes after the Warrior class, right? Which is the Armored class. They don't have much to do with each other, but it's because it is together with the Warrior in the physical body damage class, so that's why I placed it right after. It has some abilities somewhat similar to a thief's. It will have skills to steal equipment, steal items, but since there are not yet items and equipment, I haven't created this skill yet, okay? But I created some other skills, which I will apparently show you here, like life steal, more or less the life steal. Many games have this, okay? The dry life. Even in Final Fantasy V, there were some abilities that did that, but I think a thief class could have that kind of thing, right? Since they steal things, they can steal life too. Why not? Okay, since it's meant to be a more roguelike class, I gave it the ability to push opponents, right? So it's an ability that always pushes when it hits, not like a charge from Final Fantasy V that has a higher chance to push, but doesn't always push. It will push the opponent to squares, as long as those squares are free, okay? There's no another character without any very high elevation will be able to push, will be able to knock opponents from high places to make them fall. The fall damage has not been added yet, okay? No collision damage, but I will still add that. I'll see how I will balance it properly, but it will be added. For now, it's already working, okay? It's a new mechanic, this pushing mechanic that I had to create specifically for this ability, but this mechanic will also appear in other abilities, in other effects, and it started with this one, and I really like the style. It is an ability that is forcibly melee. Okay, so regardless of your weapon, you will need to get close to the opponent to use it, unlike the theft of lifesteal, right? That can be used even with ranged weapons. And since I haven't created her lifestealing abilities yet, she kind of only has these 2 abilities initially, okay? I already have more or less what I'm going to do with her, what skills I'm going to create with her, but for now that's all. And I'm also going to show here another class, which for me was one of the classes I liked the most in terms of design, which is the Bounty Hunter class, okay? The cowboy with this style, the way he turned out, I found it very cool, very good the way he turned out, especially because he is also the gunslinger. Gunslinger, right, is the class that will use pistols, which is essentially a weapon I hadn't made yet. And when I went to make it, I really liked the way it turned out. I really liked how the animation was done. I had already made her animation before, just hadn't created the weapon, but it turned out really cool. I really like firearms in this type of game. They have a very cool aesthetic, especially when creating a class like this, you know? The cowboy, I think, works very well with this type of class. It also has a nice aesthetic, even with the rogue itself, right? Because it has a very cool style. And along with the cowboy, only 2 skills came, okay? Because as a bounty hunter, he will have some utility skills that I will add. And these utility skills will need items and equipment in the game, and that's why I haven't created them yet. There will also be some other negative effect skills that I haven't made yet, but are already planned, okay, to be done, which will also be here with the cowboy. But for now, I will show here the 2 new skills that came with him, along with some new effects that came with him, which I have already programmed into the system. And it's worth mentioning that every new negative effect I add, I have to adjust the entire game mechanics so that it works properly, right? Whenever there is an effect, it checks exactly what the effect does and does everything in the best possible way. And I will show here what the abilities are. First, I have here the disable ability, right? Which is the ability to disable the opponent, making it unable to act, as I said before. Right? Now I divided the turn into 3 turns, right? You have the movement turn, your main action, and passing the turn. When you immobilized the opponent with the archer, you basically took away their movement turn. They only had the main action and you passed the turn. Now the disable does the same thing but with the main action, so you can only move and pass the turn. And it's already working very well, right? The enemies are already responding well to this. Everything is all set, all types of feedback is already being given, okay? As you can see here in the little squares, right? Where I can move, because there are some outlines, right? In the green quadrants that show whether this little house is being threatened by something enemy or not. When there is this yellow outline, you may receive an attack from some enemy. When there is a kind of blue, light blue outline, you may receive some magic, okay? However, it is not within attack range, and when it is completely green, you are completely free. No one will be able to reach you there. And all of this is already being addressed in accordance with the disable, which is this ability, right, where he shoots at the opponent's arms. And the second ability, which is an ability that will be kind of the core from what I can see here, it's the headshot ability, right, or aiming at the head, right? I used aiming at the head instead of headshot because it can be used with any weapon, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be used with firearms. But why do I say it will be the core here of the game? Because it is an ability that essentially doesn't use mana and has no cooldown, and it deals damage superior to the basic attack damage. It's a damage that ignores defense, okay? It's pure damage. It will completely ignore the target's defense, and then you have plenty of advantages, right? But to balance this ability, it kind of has ridiculously reduced accuracy. You have half the accuracy you would have with a basic attack, and it makes sense, right? It's much harder to hit the person aiming at the head than aiming at any part of the body. But it works very well, especially if the opponent doesn't have much dodge, which is the case here. And it has a new effect too, right? That it can cause. There are very few chances of it happening, but it can happen, which is the effect of stunning the opponent. The famous stun that many games have, you kind of paralyze the opponent, and here it works the same way. If it's your turn and you are stunned, you simply skip your turn. That's what the effect does. You don't play. It's extremely overpowered, but not so much since it only lasts 1 turn. Skip a turn and he will already be healed, different from what would be, for example, a sleep. Put to sleep or something like that, see, which will last more turns. The stun works this way, and it's quite good because you will keep causing very high damage. Due to the type of ability, it causes higher damage than the basic attack. It's not as high as other abilities, like the charged attack of the hunter, of the archer, but it doesn't have that charging time and it doesn't use mana. So it's a great ability to be used all the time, as long as the enemies don't have significant dodge, since its accuracy is greatly reduced. If the enemy has a bit more dodge, you won't be able to hit this skill. So it's a way for you to see and analyze whether to use this skill or not. And I quite liked it, even the style. All the aiming animations are a bit similar. I tried to refresh them by adding a few more frames. The visual effects of them blinking, something like that. And I really liked how it turned out, especially with this new weapon. This weapon turned out really cool. To use various skills, it turned out great. Its attack animation, some animations of the skills, why that's it. All the smart skills have been added. I will make more smart skills, both for healing, as for items, as for other abilities that will have several levels. I will create here some other abilities for these classes. I will also bring more new classes. Everything is kind of planned out. And before I finish here too, I wanted you to take a look at my other games. So I will leave them in the description, especially Ninja Monkey, which was my first game that I released. I released it on Steam. It is a game that I like it a lot. It already has over 60 hours, this game practically, and it's a game that I love playing, right after it was released. I have so many hours because during the game's development phase, it goes into hundreds, almost thousands of hours. A lot of time spent playing to test the game, but that's it. I'll leave the link to the games in the description. For now, I haven't created a name for this game yet, and that's why I haven't created a Discord or anything like that to bring you all in. I'm selecting some names I can come up with for it, but anyone who wants to can also leave some name ideas in the comments. It's really good sometimes to have ideas from people who play, I know there are many people who develop games out there, so they can also have great ideas. People who, if you see this game with this name, would you like to play it? Then, because the name I had thought of kind of already exists, there's already a game with it, so I won't be able to use it anymore, and that's it. So everyone subscribe. Are you still subscribed? Comment below to engage. Comment the name of the game you would like it to be. Maybe I'll choose your name. It will have the name you choose. That would be great. So that's it, and bye.